I will start with a short presentation of Empower Wednesday. So here we are. Welcome everybody. So Empower Wednesday, for the one who are new today, it's running weekly. We started in September the 15th and we will continue till the 24th of November. Of course, if you reach here already, you know that it is in English, it's free and is open to everybody. And this Empower Wednesday program is designed for international talents here in Finland. And this series of events are organized by International Working Women of Finland, which I represent here today, the city of Turku, and with the support of Turku Business Region and Tempo project by Humak University. The aim of the Empower Wednesday is to provide information that will help you to find your working path here in Finland. And that's why we try to tackle different issues about working path. We have a dance program, but first let me tell you how you can reach us. So if you're here today, I'm sure you're familiar now with this website, which is Career in Southwest Finland. And we have a dedicated page for Empower Wednesday events. It's a long URL. So if you want to point your phone to the QR code, it might be easier. There's a shortcut, but I suggest you to go and check Career in Southwest Finland web page, because they even a page dedicated to jobs which not require fluency in Finnish, so they require English. And all the events that they are in the city of Turku. So please have a visit. Empower Wednesday have a Facebook page where we update every event, and a LinkedIn page. And this event, as all the other events, will be recorded in the International Working Women YouTube channel. And there is my name and my contact. If you need anything, I will be glad to help you. So this is the calendar of this Empower Wednesday, the second in this autumn weather. So we've been talking about networking, the CV picture that I mentioned before, the LinkedIn, and which professional are needed in Finland. And today we're going to talk about how to open a business. I'm sorry, there is still the old name Potkuri that Peter will tell us more about how it changed now. Next week, we have the international partner support with Familia RU, the common challenges, and it's even the introduction of the new mentoring and coaching program for talent spouses here in Turku. So it's a very exciting day. Then we will have the mental well-being during the remote working and the job searching with Mieli Association. We will have then a joint event with Study and Stay in Turku and Empower Wednesday. So that will be streamed online. We will update soon. But the registration is already open if you want to participate. And this event is specifically targeted for international students here in Turku, and the one that they are starting their, moving their first steps in their working life. So we will tell which services are already in Turku, how to find them, and we will have a panel of alumni for all Turku universities. And a really interesting keynote speaker who is the author of Very Finnish Problem. So if you haven't read the book yet, I suggest you to Google it. It's very funny and interesting. Then the 17th of November, we will have these roundtable events with with companies that are interested in international talents, and they will tell us more about their working environment, what they are doing to attract and retain talents in their companies, and how they're important for their environments. And then the last appointment of this series of webinars will be from the unemployment office in Turku, the TA office, and they will tell us more about the different opportunity to enter in the job market, especially if you're being employed for a while. What are the tools that they can support you to re-enter in the job market. Yes, the launch of Turku Science Park is I'm very happy about, so I'll have to underline it. But today, I'm happy to present you Peter Lostedt, that he is business advisor of Turku Science Park, and he will tell us more about how to open a business in Finland. So, hi, Peter.
Hello. Good evening to everyone.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. So, should I start? Yes, I think you are muted, but I guess...
The floor is yours.
Thank you. So, yeah, let's see if I can get this to work. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, okay, good. So everything seems to be working. So yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Lostedt, and I work as a business advisor at Turku Science Park. And for the next 45 minutes or an hour or so, I'll talk a little bit about how to set up and start a business here in Finland. And basically, during this presentation, I'll talk about what we think are the most important things to consider if you want to become an entrepreneur here in Finland. And first of all, I'll start by talking a little bit about our organization. So it was mentioned here that we don't use the same name as before for our services. So before there was a pretty well-known brand called Potkuri here in Turku. And the decision was made to change the name. And we work under the sort of umbrella marketing name of Turku Business Region now. You will find the exact same services as before. Nothing has changed in that way. But just so you know, and if you want to check out our webpage, then you can do it on the webpage turkubusinessregion.com. There's also all kinds of services that we currently have available. So we do, actually the Potkuri name is still there on this slide, as I can see now, but as I said, the name is no longer in use. So that is basically our, let's say, basic service for anyone who wants to start a business. And then we also have all kinds of different other services available. We have a Spark Up startup community, which is basically for startup companies. We also have specific services for example, clean tech and ICT, and also, for example, the maritime industry. We also have, for example, the West Finland Film Commission, which tries to attract movies and movie production here to this region. So we try to help during all lines of businesses and also during all phases of a business. And my role here in this company is to provide business advice for starting companies. So that is also what I'm going to talk about now. So we provide services for customers. We are completely free of cost. So you as a customer don't need to pay anything if you want to use our services. Our services are, of course, also strictly confidential. So everything that is discussed remains within the room, so to speak. And whenever we talk with our customer, we basically start by looking at these aspects and what to consider. And now, of course, the Corona situation for the last 1.5 years, almost 2 years, is one good example of how quickly things can change for an entrepreneur. So whenever you want to become an entrepreneur, you need to understand the risks involved, and also you need to evaluate how much you can tolerate uncertainty. And that also, of course, depends on your own life situation. So are you working? Are you unemployed? Are you a student? Do you have a family? And so on. So those are all things to consider before making the decision. And usually, of course, the decision to become an entrepreneur is based on previous work experience or education, but not always. There are many customers who want to start a business in a field that they have no experience in. And in those cases, of course, it's very important to have a very good business idea, and of course also to believe in it, and also to have all the resources needed to set up the business. So we are not only talking about financial resources, but also in our opinion, it's very important to consider, as I already said, what kind of a situation you are in right now. And then there are, of course, also calculations and profitability things to consider, but that's something that the business advisor will definitely help with. So these are all things that we basically start with whenever a customer comes and speaks with us about their business idea. And the business idea, of course, is very important and something that you will need to think about. And the most crucial questions are, of course, what, to whom, and how. That's sort of the basic line that you should use. And as I already told you, it's usually based on the skills and expertise, work experience of the entrepreneur. And one way to think about the business idea is to think about it as a solution to some kind of a problem that maybe the customer has. And of course, from your perspective as a customer, but also from our perspective as the business advisor, you also need to consider whether you think that your idea can generate money. And of course, that is also dependent on whether you want to be a full-time entrepreneur or whether you think that your idea could only be a part-time business. The easiest way to basically think about generating money is to do a profitability calculation, for example, because that usually tells you what kind of expenses you will have for your business. You also need to take into consideration what kind of salary expectation you have. And then when you complete the calculation, it basically shows you how much money you will need to sell your services for in order for the calculation, the equation to work. So it's relatively simple in many ways, but very few people have done these kind of calculations before. So that's why it's very important to do it before you set up the business, to get an idea of how realistic the idea is. And when you think about the business idea, there is one good tool that you can use, which is the business plan. And again, our version is fairly simple in many ways. There are many different business plans available that you can use, but we have a template that is very simple to use. And everything starts with a general presentation or overview of what you are planning to do under the business idea topic. And then when you move on, you will go into more detail about what kind of products or services you will have. And this can be, of course, tricky many times. And sometimes customers they are too ambitious. So they have lots and lots of different services instead of focusing on maybe one or two. So that's very important to also plan. Then we have customers and market information, which sometimes can be extremely valuable to do in more detail. It depends a little bit about what kind of idea you have, but it's very good to try to analyze a little bit who your customers are, where are they, is there a demand for your product, what kind of competition do you have, and so on. And it doesn't need to be a very in-depth analysis. It's usually just okay to try to analyze a little bit about the market situation, but that also, of course, depends on the customer. Some people have just recently moved to Finland, have maybe recently moved to Turku, and basically have very limited information about the market in here. Then we have sales and marketing. Without sales and marketing, of course, you don't have a company. And again, depending a little bit on the form of the business, if you are alone with your business idea, then of course you take care of everything. But if you have a team around you that is part of the business, then of course it's very useful to divide the responsibilities within the business. So someone might have the responsibility of marketing, someone might be the CEO, and so on. So making some sort of a marketing plan is usually worthwhile, and also doing some kind of a budget for at least, let's say, the first few months of the business. Then we have company image, and that's usually not a problem. I would say most people have a pretty good idea of what kind of values they want to portray. So number 5 is usually relatively easy. And again, it depends a lot on the business idea, whether that is extremely important or whether you don't need to put too much effort into that. So the first page is relatively simple, and usually customers don't have a lot of problems doing the first page. But then when we move on to the second page, that's where the problems usually start. And the reason is that in the second page, you have to take into consideration money. So you need to do some kind of a financing analysis where you try to make an estimation of how much money you need for the business. You also need to look at profitability and pricing to give some sort of estimate of what kind of prices you should have. We also have a SWOT analysis in our business plan. The SWOT analysis might be familiar to some of you. It's just a very basic analysis where you think about what kind of strengths and opportunities you have compared to threats and weaknesses of your business idea. Business calculations, that's usually the financial calculation and profitability calculation. And then in the end, we also have a self-evaluation where you basically analyze a little bit about yourself, what kind of work experience you have you been an entrepreneur before, and so on. So this is the business plan, and it's very simple compared to many other templates that I've seen, but of course it's up to you to decide what kind of template you want to use. And some templates are very detailed, and that's perfectly all right. But usually a basic business plan is enough if, for example, you are applying for a loan from a bank, or if you are applying for a startup grant. So that's the business plan, very important tool in my opinion to use. Then when we go on, we'll talk a little bit about the different forms of entrepreneurship here in Finland. And of course, the main customer that we have wants to open a totally new business. So he or she will then register a new business, but sometimes it's also possible to buy a business, the entire business or a part of the business. In those cases, or in those cases, it's usually a very good idea to have like a third party involved in the whole process. It can be a bookkeeper, it can be a business consultant, someone who basically helps you, also the seller of the business. And in that case, usually all the documents and all the agreements are made correctly. It's also possible to open a cooperative and of course also a franchising, but these are very, very rarely seen here in our office. So they are part of or forms of entrepreneurship, but they are very, very rarely seen nowadays. Part-time entrepreneurship, on the other hand, is something that many want to do, and in those cases it's usually very easy because you have your normal day job, you receive a normal salary, and then you can try out your business and have it as a part-time business. So those cases are usually fairly easy in that regard. Then, of course, we also have startup entrepreneurs, and theoretically, you can become a shareholder in a limited liability company, and in that sense, then become an entrepreneur. When you want to choose what form of business you want to use, there are certain aspects that you should consider. The principal one is the number of people that want to become part of the business. If you are alone, there are only basically two options, but if you are a team, a group of people, there are more options available. You also need to consider the amount of money you need and also what kind of responsibilities the group members or the shareholders in the business will have. You also want to consider how flexible the business decision making is. Sometimes also some finance providers typically want the business to be a limited liability company. For example, Business Finland grants typically is one example of grants that basically wants you to have a limited liability company and also a team of members around your business idea. Profit sharing, taxation are also, of course, important to consider when you choose the actual form of the business. And next in this slide, there is the actual forms available. So you can, in Finland, be a private trader if you want to. That is basically your personal business. And as you can see, it's not very expensive. If you register this online, you can register it for 60 euros. But this is only if you want to become a business owner only on your own. So you can't have a group involved in this form. Then we have something called a general partnership and also a limited partnership. These are also very, very rarely seen nowadays. And the reason is that most people, if you have a group of people, then typically they want to register a limited liability company, in Finnish osakeyhtiö, which nowadays can be registered for a fairly low amount of money, only 275 euros if you do it online. And then there is also the possibility of a cooperative, but that is also slightly more expensive. And so there are many differences between these forms of business. And if we would go through them all, it would be an hour or two just to do that. So it's no point to go through everything here. It's much more valuable for you as a customer to basically just come and discuss with a business advisor about your idea. And during that meeting, you can then learn more about the different forms that are available. But just to give you an overview of what kind of forms there are available and what kind of costs are involved. Good. Then we have the startup grant, which is probably interesting to many of you if you want to become business owners. The startup grant is provided by the employment office, and it is only for full-time entrepreneurs only, which means that you basically can't be a student, for example. You also can't have a normal day job at the same time. So if you apply for the startup grant, you need to become a full-time entrepreneur. The grant is not a huge amount of money, as you can see, about 33.78 euros per day, and it is paid for at most 5 days in a calendar week, which means that for a total of, or for a whole month, the grant is a little bit over 700 euros, but you also need to pay taxes. So after taxes, you will end up with around 600 euros per month of startup grant. The length is 6 months, but there's also a possibility for an extension for the next 6 months. And if you want to apply for the extension, it's a very, let's say, free application. You just need to tell why you are applying for this extension, and you also need to put or include some sort of statement from the bookkeeper, for example, of how you are actually doing. The startup grant is something that many people apply for, and many people also get it, but it's not automatic money. It's always a decision which is based on basically the business plan itself and the calculations that you have made. There are conditions for granting the support, and one is the availability of money, which in recent years hasn't been a problem. So the employment office typically has enough money to grant these startup grants. And then, of course, they will evaluate whether you have the capabilities, whether the business can be profitable enough. You need to be a full-time entrepreneur. And then one important thing to remember is that the business idea should not distort competition, which means that if you want to register, for example, let's say maybe a cafe or restaurant or a hairdresser salon in the middle of Turku in the city center, then typically you won't get the startup grant in those cases because the employment office regards the competition to be too fierce. There's too much competition. There's too many of similar businesses in those cases. It's important to remember that when you apply for the startup grant, you need to apply first and then wait for the decision. And only after that, you should then register the business. So remember to apply first, wait for the decision, and then register the business. Your background will be checked by the employment office. So you should not have any unpaid taxes or other statutory payments that you have not paid. And also you should not have any other forms of income, such as a salary or various support or benefits. There are, of course, many different benefits available. And if you want to check whether a specific support or benefit will affect your startup grant, then you need to check with the employment office beforehand. So the startup grant is a very good opportunity to get a little bit of grant. When you become a full-time entrepreneur, you need to include a business plan. You also need to have profitability calculations, and you also need to have a certificate from the taxation office that you don't have any unpaid taxes. So those are basically the conditions for the startup grant. And it's usually a very good idea to come and speak with a business advisor before you apply for the startup grant, because we can then provide you with the templates that you need, and of course also discuss your idea on a more general level. So that was the startup grant, and the time is again running wild, so I'll move on and talk a little bit about financing. Financing is, of course, very critical for most people who want to become entrepreneurs. And in this slide, there's only like a comparison between basically probably the most used options available. So the bank loan nowadays is probably what most people apply for. The Finvera loan used to be a pretty good opportunity or option, because beforehand the minimum amount of money was only 10,000 euros, which was for many enough. But now they raised it to 50,000 euros, which is for many a lot of money. But Finnvera can still be part of the loan negotiations in the sense that they can also guarantee a loan for you. In those cases, it's something that the bank and Finnvera will discuss together. In both instances, the interest rate is dependent on the current situation and also the applicant. The length of the loan is nowadays very negotiable. It's of course up to the customer to decide what would be the most realistic way of paying back the loan. And both Finnvera and the bank requires also some kind of real security from you, which means basically your money or your some kind of maybe let's say your apartment or house, something that guarantees the loan for you. So it's the same principle as if you were a private person and would apply for a loan. The bank nowadays, as with basically all financiers, are strictly regulated, and basically that means that they all want to see good business plans, good calculations before they make a decision. So in other words, the business plan in these cases is always a very important tool to use, and also, of course, to provide very realistic calculations for the bank. The more money you apply for, the more strict the financing decision will become. And it basically, of course, depends on you what kind of money you need just to set up the business. But nowadays, most people need to apply for a loan if you don't have enough money of your own that you can invest into the company. And of course, theoretically, you could maybe find an investor, maybe a business angel. There are, of course, also crowdfunding options, but as you might imagine, those are very, very limited options for most people. So if you want to or if you need financing, typically a bank loan is the thing that you will need to apply for. There is, if you become an entrepreneur, there are of course many, many different things you need to consider, but in the following slides, there's basically just to remind you the most important things to consider, and one is the pension insurance. So if you become a full-time entrepreneur, the pension insurance is something you will need to have. And you need to take the insurance if your estimated income is actually, the figure is a little bit higher this year. It's around 8,000 euros, a little bit over that. So if your estimated income is at least that much, you need to take the pension insurance. And depending on what kind of estimated income you will tell the pension insurance company that you have, then based on that figure, you will get the pension insurance fees. And of course, that will also then affect your social security and pension insurance and pension insurance fees. Don't worry too much about this. This is also something that we will definitely go through when you come and discuss your business idea with a business advisor. But just so you remember, the pension insurance is mandatory and very important because it's your pension insurance and also your social security here in Finland. The other, let's say, very important thing to consider is the taxation. And in Finland, there are two forms of taxation. One is the income tax, and the other one is the value-added tax. The income tax is based on income, and it also, of course, varies between different forms of enterprise. But typically, the income tax is paid in advance, so you have to estimate what kind of sales you will have. And based on that estimation, you will be sent an income tax invoice. Unfortunately, Terttu Suomalainen, who used to be our taxation officer, recently retired. So unfortunately, we don't have a specific taxation officer anymore. That's something I need to correct in this slide. But the taxation office does have different phone lines that you can use. And of course, from your perspective, you probably would like to have a bookkeeper who will take care of all these taxation issues that you will face. Value-added tax is another tax that you will need to take care of. The most important thing is to remember that it is a consumption tax, which is basically something that the consumer needs to pay. You only include it in the price of the product or service, and you then pay the state the value-added tax he or she has collected. So it basically goes through your company, but it's never your own money, so to speak. It's a consumer tax. And this year, actually, the net sales for the accounting period needs to exceed 15,000. So it's a little bit higher this year. So if your sales are lower than 15,000, then you don't need to include your business into the value-added tax register. But for most people, if you become a full-time entrepreneur, you typically need to have sales of, I don't know, 30, 40,000 euros. So in most cases, a full-time entrepreneur basically needs to join the value-added tax register. So remember 15,000, not 10,000 euros. Sorry about that misinformation in the slide. In Finland, there are also permits that you need to take care of. In most cases, there is a freedom of trade, which means that most business owners don't need to take care of permits. But there are certain industries which basically require you to have a license, depending a little bit what kind of a business idea it is. And these licenses are typically granted by the local authorities, so the municipality or the city in which the business is registered in. For healthcare professions, such as doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, Valvira is the organization or authority that will grant these permits. Then there are also permits needed for example, food establishments, so restaurants, cafes, and in those cases, it's typically, again, the municipality or the city that provides these permits and also inspections of the facilities that you need to use. Remember that it's also mandatory to have licenses if you play music in the background, for example. So, for example, a hairdressing salon, for example, a barber shop that plays music in the background, that business owner would need to pay a fee to copyright organizations, and Teosto are basically the institutions that basically govern these permits. So always try to establish whether you need a license before you start a business. The business owner, or sorry, the business advisor basically has some idea in many cases, but we don't know every single industry. So of course, it's the responsibility of the business owner to take care of all the licenses and make sure that you have them before you then start your operations. That's basically it. So as I said, there are many things to consider, but it would be basically pointless to have like a 2-hour presentation about everything imaginable. Those are the things that, in our opinion, are the most important to consider. And I strongly recommend that you contact your local business advisor. At least in the most larger cities, there are the same kind of organizations as the one that we have here in Turku that provide free of fees services for business business owners. So you will get advice. You don't need to pay anything. Everything's confidential. You will get very good templates that you can use. You will get guides that will help you on the way. So I strongly recommend that you contact a business advisor before you start a business. And for those who want to have an appointment here in Turku, you can call our service number to make the appointment. Remember that when you make the appointment, that if you want to speak English, that you mention it, because then you will be directed to a business advisor who can help you in English. You don't have to make a business plan before the meeting, but it's usually a pretty good idea to do so. But the business advisor will definitely also help you with the business plan and calculations. So thank you. That's basically what I have to say at this point. It's as I said, you don't have anything to lose when you come and see a business advisor. You will definitely be at least a little bit wiser of what you need to do and in what order. Also, of course, whether your business idea can be profitable or not, and especially if it's a full-time or if it's more like a part-time business. So please come and make an appointment with a business advisor. Typically, you don't need to wait for that long before you get an appointment. At this time, maybe within a week or so, you can get an appointment. So you don't need to wait usually for that long. So thank you again for my part. And
thank you, Peter. We have a few questions for you, if you don't mind. Great. Let me share my screen so you can see what I mean. Voila. Okay. So Francisca was asking how the company is set up called in Finnish. I'm not sure if I understand this question. Do you?
Not exactly, no.
Francisca, would you be able to maybe unmute yourself and ask better if you want to?
Yeah, hi. I'm talking about, you're talking about liabilities and all the screen you have said that like what are different costs, but could you actually mention what are the names of those in Finnish? That might be easier to find any information about that.
Yeah, so the private trader company is called toiminimi in Finnish. And then the limited liability company is called osakeyhtiö. Those are the most common forms available. Then we also have the general partnership, which is called avoin yhtiö. And then we also have the cooperative, which is called osuuskunta in Finnish. And what else? We have the limited partnership, I think, as well, which is called kommandiittiyhtiö in Finnish. But as I said during the presentation, you don't need to know everything about the different forms of the companies, because if you then come and see a business advisor, you will definitely get the opportunity to talk more about the different forms. But yeah, those are the sort of Finnish terms for the business forms. A good question.
Thank you.
Thanks also from my side.
Great. Then you were talking about the cost to set up the company, and the question is the registration cost fixed annually or monthly?
Yeah, it's just a one-time payment that you need to do. So if you register, for example, the private trader company, it costs 60 euros. You just pay it once and then it's paid for. You don't need to pay it any other time.
Great. So this is, I think, is a question.
I just added a link to kaupparegisteri. What's that in English? I have blacked out the list of costs of registering the company to chat.
Okay, thank you, Megumi. The next question, I think, is more a question for Migri than us, and is, does establishing a startup provide a resident permit?
Yeah, that's definitely something that I basically can't in any way discuss, because I don't have anything to do with it. In some cases, yes, Migri will review, let's say, the customer if he or she has a business or wants to become a business owner. But in these cases, you definitely need to check with Migri about all the sort of conditions that may be present if you buy. It also depends where you are from. So in all these, let's say, resident permit cases, please contact Migri, because you will need the official decision by them.
Thank you. And the next question is the format of a private trade the best for self-employer? In this case, Maxim, she's making a different handmade dolls and toys.
Yeah, well, it depends, but the private trader is a very easy, flexible way to start the business. It doesn't cost a lot, and then if at some point the business grows, then you can just change it into a limited liability company, for example, especially if, for example, another business partner would like to join you. So it's a little bit impossible to say whether it's the best, but it's definitely one of the typical options that you have if you are only on your own, so to speak. But you also can register a limited liability company alone. So both are basically options. So it depends on the business idea. It depends on many things, which basically will be discussed then with the business advisor.
Thank you. And then the other question is from Daniela. What about artist agency? I don't think there's any need of a license.
As far as I know, I also don't think there's like a mandatory license, but I can't say for 100% certainty that that's the case. But if I think about, let's say, customers that we've had before in the same industry, then I can't think of like a very, let's say, mandatory or very important license that would be somehow related to artist agencies. The most typical or the most important permits are the ones that I mentioned in the presentation. So healthcare professionals and also the food industry, so restaurants and cafes, for example. Those are the typical industries that have mandatory permits.
That's great. I didn't see any other question in the chat, but if you have some questions and you would like to unmute yourself, maybe you can go ahead. Peter, can you stay with us another couple of minutes?
Yeah.
Great, but I think that we covered all the aspects, and one question was if we can send the presentation to all participants.
Yeah.
That would be great, thank you. We usually do, but you can even see the recording. Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, I think we can release you from this Empower Wednesday session.
Yeah. Thank you, and it's very nice to be part of this network. And as I said, please do come and see a business advisor, even if you're only thinking about it, because it will definitely be helpful for you to make the decision maybe a little bit later, and you'll get much needed information. You'll get templates, you'll get guides that you can use. So in that sense, I strongly recommend that you make an appointment.
I think one of the basic mistakes that I've heard a lot is that people register their company and then ask for support and advice, and it should be the other ways around.
Yeah,
so maybe people are highlighting and they found the name and they're so excited and it's so easy to register your company online. Yeah. And people hurry up to do that and they think about the logo, the name, and those kind of things before asking for the support. And this is usually the trap that people fell into.
Yeah.
We have another question from Mian, and is what is the cost of sole proprietorship in Finland, especially for pharmacy? I have no idea.
The cost, I'm not sure I understand. Do you mean the registration cost, or let's say costs in general?
Mian, would you like to unmute yourself maybe and let us understand more?
Hi, yeah, my question is basically I just want to know what is the total cost per registration and to get the pharmacy permit, if you know that.
Yeah, so if I would imagine if you would be a pharmacist that and you would have your own business, maybe a pharmacy, then basically I would guess the limited liability company would basically be the option. And in that case, you can register it for 275 euros. That's the registration cost. But of course, if you would need to have a business in the pharmacy industry, maybe even your own pharmacy, then there's probably a lot of other costs involved. But the registration cost would probably be the limited liability registration cost.
Okay, that's great. And Megumi just posted in the chat the first step to establish your business in Finland from Career and Southwest Finland pages, so you can even have a look there. Okay, thanks everybody, and it's time to go to enjoy the lovely weather outside. Of course.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, and see you next Wednesday. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. It was very nice to have you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.